Hi, I'm Kelsey Ale. I'm a certified nutritional therapist and a best-selling healthy cookbook author, and I am so excited to welcome you to the 2021 Mindset Mastery for Business Leaders Summit hosted by my friend, Nicole Holland, where I'll be teaching you about how to rapidly improve your company's success by optimizing your own health.
Yay. Thanks so much, Kelsey. I'm super excited to have you. And this is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
My pleasure. All right. So I'm going to look at my notes because I've got a question I want to kick things off with. So, Kelsey, you do quite a bit of clinical testing as well as multifaceted assessments when you start working with clients to improve their overall health and wellness. What are some of the most common symptoms and issues that you find specifically with business leaders when they first come to you for help?
I think that's a really great question. And it's important to remember that business leaders are people too. so it's a wide variety of symptoms. And even though business leaders do tend to experience more stress, so I typically do ask around, like poke around a little bit more to get some insight into adrenal function and stress level. I also always start with optimizing gut health. In addition to stress, there are so many other factors that we as business leaders and as humans, we live through and experience that impact our gut health. And I find that the gut is really the foundation of health in the body. And you can't feel great if you're bloated and having indigestion and bathroom irregularities all the time. Plus, that puts stress on all the other systems in your body. So we always optimize gut health first. And then we look at adrenals, we look at hormones. And when I work one-on-one with clients, I not only work through the lab testing results using supplements and nutrition recommendations and custom dietary plans, but I also look a lot at lifestyle and try to work with people in a way that's manageable to implement lifestyle tweaks and additions or enhancements or simplifications that can reduce stress that just enhances overall wellness.
That's awesome. So, when we talk about gut health, for folks who maybe have heard the term, but haven't really taken the time to really understand what that means, can you just give us a brief overview about when you say gut health, like what are you looking for? What are you typically finding? And what is the impact of the gut being out of, I can't even think of the word, but to be off, like when you find these things, how is this manifesting for people in their everyday lives?
Yeah, I think that's really important to be aware of because sometimes the symptoms we experience as a result of gut health imbalance don't automatically make you think about gut health. But fatigue and brain fog are actually really common symptoms of having a gut health imbalance. And typically, what I end up seeing in a lot of people is some sort of infection. And that's kind of what I specialize in working with as well when it comes to gut health, is like identifying what these infections are. Like I work with professionals who travel for business, and I'm glad you had a great time in Mexico on your business trip, but you brought back some unintended souvenirs. And now you're in the bathroom 6, 7, 8 times a day and you don't know what's going on. So I help you identify what the imbalance is, whether it's an infection or if it's just a digestive imbalance that we need to work on supporting digestion through enzymes and stomach acid production, or if we actually need to address the infection. We figure that out, see what it is on the gut health test results, and then can come up with a really specific and efficient plan to make sure you can get your energy back, to reduce the systemic inflammation, to reduce the brain fog, enhance mental clarity, and that sort of thing.
Awesome. And I am not a gut health expert. So, so I believe science over the past, especially maybe 10 years ish, have really zeroed in on that a lot of problems start in the gut. And it's because of things like, lifestyle things like traveling and picking up parasites. But also, I think, and I don't know, this is what I want you to talk about. There's a lot of foods that are manufactured in certain ways that contribute. And a lot of people don't think about these things until there's a problem, right? I know for myself, I'm Italian and I lived in Europe for 5 years and I've traveled a lot, like breads and flour-based products have been all my life. Pastas and things have always been some of my mainstays. And all of a sudden, when I had a whole bunch of problems going on and the doctors were checking all kinds of things, it took a long time to figure things out. But one of the things that came up a bunch was, now the doctors didn't talk about this, but other people that I knew had asked about things like, what are you eating and how could that be affecting you and stuff like this. And I thought I'd never had a problem, never had any issue. But now I know, no, I am gluten intolerant. And I have, been through the battery of tests with my allergist. And, it's pretty much I'm allergic to gluten. And then there's all these other environmental things that, that have affected my life, but I didn't know because I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't focused on it. So I'd love it if we can, go into a little bit about, for people who are not already looking holistically at their health and recognizing that there are these things that they can control and they feel like there's a problem, got to go to the doctor. They're going allopathic all the way. I'd love it if we can just kind of dive into that a little bit more so that so we get people onto the same page as we continue the discussion.
Yeah, well, I love that you even use the word control, because a huge part of my mission when I work with clients is empowerment. I'm not here to create a food prison for you to make your life feel like the most restricted, boring thing ever. But I really want to empower people by offering information and insights that you typically can't get from allopathic medicine. There are a lot of clients that I work with who have run the gamut of going to doctors and specialists and haven't really been able to get clear answers because of things like food sensitivities that aren't either tested properly or aren't even really acknowledged when you're talking about things like fatigue or inflammation or brain fog. People think more, brain function or cardiovascular or something, but people aren't looking at food sensitivities, for example. And so I think the subtlety of the testing that I do, which is to look at gut function and look at food sensitivities, it can be really empowering, and it is really important as far as building a foundation that allows you to create sustainable wellness. So again, you know what to do. You start to get more familiar with your body. You can make educated choices that just support your process. Yeah, you want to feel good in your body. You want to feel energized. You want to be able to focus. You want to be able to think creatively and quickly. And a lot of times when you're working with an allopathic doctor, I like to say, if you break your leg, you don't want to take cod liver oil. Like, that's not the time to take fish oil. You need to go to a specialist. You need to go to a surgeon. But when it comes to building sustainable wellness, starting with diet and starting with supplements is really the best way to build a solid foundation so that you don't get to the point where you have these chronic illnesses and chronic symptoms that are impacting your life in a negative way.
Thank you. And I think it's so relevant now too, as conversations around mental health become more commonplace. And with, the society that we're living in these days and the conditions, there's all this external stress and messaging and all these things, distractions at the end of the day, that really consume most people's lives. They pull them in different directions. No matter how much we want to stay here, sometimes it's hard. It's hard, especially when you have a family or you're like interacting outside of your normal, like healthy environment. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the different experiences that folks could have that indicate, it's time to look at your lifestyle. It's time to look at holistically what's happening internally and all of that. Because we can say, brain fog and inflammation and things like that. But I'd love it if we can really use some examples to drive things home. Again, I'll just use myself as an example. When I was, really at my lowest before being treated for an autoimmune disorder, which I as quick as possible went through the allopathic side to get myself to a point where I really could understand and implement lifestyle things and make choices. And now I'm completely off meds. I've been off meds since August 2019 for lupus, which before I was so ill that I needed the meds and I needed the allopathic doctors to help me get to neutral. And so I think if I had known back then about the things that you work with people about and that you teach about, I think that if somebody would have come along and been like, here, let's go in this route and investigate it this way, I think that would have saved me a lot of pain and heartache and money and time and all of those things. So, I mean, you mentioned brain fog, like that for me manifested in a way where I couldn't remember things, and like exhaustion where I'm sleeping like 10 hours a day and I feel still like I can't even move. My breath was hard, my lungs would like seize up. And there were all these manifestations. I gained so much weight. I put on like 60 pounds in a fairly short period of time. And like, I just would say, okay, well, I don't know why this happened, but now I'm tired because of the extra weight. I'm not breathing well because of the extra weight. But no matter what I did, I could not on my own, even though I had previously been able to control, my weight. I guess genetically, maybe I morphed. I don't know. But through life as I got older, things changed and I couldn't behave or live the way I had in the past. Things affected me differently. Stress affected me differently. At the time, I was a correctional officer. And prior to that, I had spent years in like managing crises for other people, being in the middle of it. And I guess at one point in my life, something just went, not anymore, Nicole. Now you need to get out of the crisis mode. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about examples, if you can, of clients who've come to you, kind of what they were experiencing, especially as business leaders. So whether they were in roles where they were running teams, they were in management, or if they were founders or entrepreneurs. I see a lot of folks in the entrepreneurial space within the first few years just totally burn out and like crash. And it's so, so common. So yeah, let me throw it over you and stop talking.
Yeah, no, you're great. I want to say just first and foremost that so many people come to me and one of the most common lines I hear is like, it just started happening. This just happened. And that's bullshit. Nothing, like everything is cumulative. There were choices and decisions and actions that we were going through and making for decades leading up to this point of burnout or crash or fatigue and dramatic weight gain in a short period of time, which actually isn't that uncommon, especially for women, because stress affects our hormones. And it is like your body does the best it can to maintain homeostasis, which is that internal sense of balance, until it absolutely can't anymore. And so I'm sure prior to that experience for you, for example, there were little things that were popping up that were just easy to ignore. And I think that when it comes to those little like orange flags leading up to the big red flags, everyone's pain tolerance is different and everyone's threshold is different for seeking help and support. So, I mean, the example I gave of going on a business trip and coming back with some sort of gut infection and going to the bathroom 10 times a day, that's actually a client that I worked with who was like, I went on this great retreat, but I haven't stopped shitting since I got home. But that for him was enough to like reach out and contact me. That was enough discomfort for him. And so we were able to implement a really effective acute digestive enhancement protocol and deal with whatever he had going on to address it relatively quickly. Whereas other clients that I work with, have been experiencing symptoms for years. Some people, I think, are just more adaptive. I think we're all highly adaptive creatures, so our ability to ignore our discomfort is available in varying forms and varying people. So I work with some clients in the music industry who they're like, oh, I get super nauseous when I eat and then I have to go to the bathroom. So I just don't eat while I work. And that was fine for them for like 10 years. And now they're like, I realize this isn't working out for me anymore. I need to be able to eat. The pain is getting worse. Now they're seeking out things they can do. I have other clients who kind of like what I was referring to earlier, who've gone through a lot of different methods to try to figure out the source, kind of like what you did. They've gone allopathic, they've tried a variety of holistic or more natural approaches. And I think that what's unique to the work that I'm able to do with them is that I combine that holistic and as much natural as possible with the clinical findings and clinical support and ability to outsource. So chronic diarrhea, nausea, inability to eat, and brain fog and overall inflammation and low libido is also really common. And again, I think, people don't, oftentimes we separate work and private. So you're not going to think like, oh, my libido is low and that's affecting my work somehow, but typically the source is similar, that's causing the brain fog and causing the low libido. So you can't focus and you don't have energy to do more than 2 things a day. And you can't maybe fill out your schedule the way you would like to because you're just so exhausted after 3 calls, or you can only work 3 days a week, but not by choice because that's all you have the bandwidth for.
I just want to butt in here for a second because I'm loving this. And I think one of the things you said just triggered a thought, which is, I think, because just, in terms of low libido. So I think a lot of times because people, once they get into long-term relationships, marriages or whatever, they have children, there's kind of commonly, most people, their sex life kind of goes in a different direction than it did before they had children. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting as you're talking, I'm like, well, that's something that I think people wouldn't really notice as much. They would just, pass it off as this is kind of part of marriage or whatever. This is life, and not think, oh, this is, there's something more to this. Just like you were saying with the, right. That's a symptom. Like you were saying, like it could be a symptom of marriage. They might think instead of, oh, this could be a symptom of what's going on in my body. Mm-hmm. Like the musician that doesn't eat because for 10 years and then is all like, well, this isn't working anymore. I think that things like that are so hard for us, people who are not the experts like you, to identify and recognize. And I wonder if you could share some thoughts on like a weekly self-assessment, like some questions so that we can just be more aware of what our natural, our healthy state should be, what our current state is, so that over time, if we add this as a habit, like on a week-to-week basis to check in on these certain things, we can start seeing patterns and know, okay, if this kind of goes in this direction, then it's time to maybe call someone for support or read a book or, maybe try an elimination diet or whatever the case. Can you give us some thoughts around these kind of weekly questions we can ask ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one question that seems most pivotal that comes to mind, I personally use it, and I always ask my clients during our sessions together as well, is what do you want for yourself? And I think so often, especially as entrepreneurs and thought leaders and business leaders, we ask more of like, what do I need to do? What needs to happen? What needs to get done to get me from this point to the next point? But you do really need to take into consideration the quality of life question. What do I want for myself? What do you want your experience to be? And that can be both personally, or professionally, because what that allows you to do, if you're able to get really present and connect to your wants, is to see the disparity or the difference between what your lived experience is versus what your ideal lived experience would be. And from there, you can start making moves to get from point A to point B. But without getting clear on what you want your experience to be, there's no way. It's like, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? Yeah. So again, like every session with my clients, I start off by asking them, what do you want for yourself? And as we continue our work together, I generally work with people for 3 months at a time. And it's important because that want changes. I think that our belief in what's possible also really impacts our ability to envision what we want. And as you start to get well is you have an enhanced sense of well-being in your body. Your inflammation is reduced, you're sleeping better, your stress levels are managed, you're not bloated all the time. Your ability to envision an even greater ideal life also becomes available. So you're able to set, I don't even necessarily want to call them goals, but I like thinking of it as a vision. Like, what's the vision you hold for yourself? And so it just allows you to continue to build this yellow brick road to kind of get to the most ideal version of yourself and your life that you can possibly create. And I do think it's all circumstantial and contextual. Like, what you want is what I want is different from what you want, and how we're going to get there is going to be different. But again, if you can get a clear vision of where you want to be, both personally, whether it's in your body, in your marriage or relationship, how you want to interact with your team, if you can get really clear on what you want, then I think it's helpful for saying, okay, well, like, I'm here now, but I want this. So what steps and changes do I need to make to get to that next place?
That's awesome. So yeah, so it's like, okay, what do I want for myself? And then would you even say, I'm thinking, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, for me, just to be able to quantify it and break it down, it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, how closely related to what I want do I feel right now? Like, how do I feel?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, where am I at? And then to go deeper into that, maybe even to ask myself, okay, what are the aspects that feel misaligned? Or,
Mm-hmm.
and then what are the aspects that feel aligned? Like, in which
Yes.
ways do I feel like I'm doing good, or I've been doing good this week, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, ooh, I'm heading in that right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, just in this conversation too, in the context of, because I do these kinds of things oftentimes for business, but not necessarily for my health and wellness. So I
Mm-hmm.
think even for me, I'll probably, from this, make a
Yeah.
list and like have that just as a part of a weekly practice, to say this specifically
Mm-hmm.
in health. How do I want to feel in my body? What do I want
Yeah.
to look like? What do I want to be able to accomplish? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I want to feel when I'm, bringing the groceries up the stairs and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
And then, how close am I experiencing currently what I want, and and what's like good and what's missing, and then to be able to zero in on those specific aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like, am I on the right track
Yeah.
here?
Oh no, you're on an amazing track. I think that oftentimes it is helpful to have a friend or somebody who you can talk through this with, because other people will be able to offer another insight or perspective, and they might be able to help you more clearly identify the thing that you want, or help you see some steps or opportunities to get to that next place that you might not be able to see for yourself. Because it also isn't an immediate, instantaneous overhaul. It's kind of usually a process, whether it's a process of a week or a few months or a couple of years, to make these really lasting changes in your brain and in your behaviors, and to really heal your body and get to that optimal place. But taking the first step, and again, you identify where you want to go, and then you take the first step to get there. And I think that before people start to get overwhelmed, you really just have to take one step at a time, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that's, I think, the best approach to health and wellness. Because I also think what's come into vogue in the last few years, which is biohacking, it's very like quick fix, but it's also complicated and inaccessible, and maybe doesn't feel like the right choice for you. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I think it really is about mastering the basics. And when you get the basics in place, then you're building a solid foundation from which to move forward.
Beautiful. So, would you like to share some more about the basics? What are those things to master at the beginning?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, when I say basics, I mean super, super basics. Like, I'm not even going to tell you to eat paleo. I'm going to ask if you're eating. Like, one of the first things that I have my clients do when I work with them is fill out a food journal. And you may or may not be surprised to see how many food journals I get back, where people literally list one meal a day. And again, not because they're like, oh, I'm following OMAD. And that's a personal choice, but more often it's, we get caught up with phone calls, or we have back-to-back clients, or we have meetings and unexpected things happen. And we're prioritizing our business over our personal well-being, not recognizing that skipping that meal is actually enhancing your stress level and reducing your capacity to engage in a meaningful way with your team. Because like, the science is that when you miss a meal, or when you don't eat and your blood sugar drops, your body releases excess cortisol to raise your blood sugar levels back up so that you don't go into a coma. But what that means is by avoiding eating, you're just increasing your chemical stress level in your body. You're increasing that cortisol load in your body when you're already running a team and, in a lot of ways trying to be a magician and a superstar at the same time. So definitely getting on a regular eating schedule, I find for myself to be super helpful. And for a lot of clients, it can just start to make a huge difference again in the day-to-day stress levels that they experience. And then we shift our focus to eating whole foods as much as possible. But then again, I want to help you figure out what that looks like in reality for your body, because we don't all have a private chef and we don't all have time to cook for ourselves. That maybe what that looks like is meal prepping one day a week so that you have a batch of food. At least you're going to have 2 solid meals a day, and then you can order out for dinner. Or ordering a meal delivery service, which is actually something that I do from time to time. I'm really fortunate to live in LA, so I have good options, which might not be accessible to everybody. But if it is accessible to you, definitely consider it as an option if you know it's going to help you stay on top of eating and being able to eat whole foods. But if meal delivery isn't an option for you and you don't have an assistant who can meal prep for you, I definitely recommend meal prepping, even something as simple as cooking some chicken breast and cooking some vegetables and cooking some rice, because then at the very least, you have a whole meal ready for you when lunchtime comes, whether or not you're hungry. I always encourage people to eat at least every 4 hours or so, just to keep your energy levels up and your blood sugar levels up. Water also, I think, is another thing that's really easy for us to, again, kind of push to the wayside because we're distracted. Maybe you had a water bottle. Exactly. I know, I need to drink too. We get distracted. We don't think about it. And that's also why I encourage people to get a big water bottle. Get a 40-ounce water bottle or a 32-ounce cup or something, so that, at least if you've had one of them, you're halfway to your meeting your water needs for the day, and you're not going to be parched and feel like your mouth is a desert. So those are a couple of the basic physical things that I think people really need to master. Are you sleeping? Also, sleep is so important. And I think I've struggled with insomnia. I think it's really common for creatives, especially, and people who are in high demand positions, to experience insomnia. But regardless of how many hours of sleep you get a night, making sure you're getting quality sleep and making sure you have a designated area that's just for you to rest. Maybe you don't actually fall asleep, but you're in kind of a Zen zone, meditating, just relaxing and breathing and giving yourself that time so that your body and brain can detoxify. Your brain can start to kind of coalesce the thoughts and kind of start to file and organize everything in your brain. Whatever that restfulness looks like for you, regardless of whether, again, you're in a phase where you're sleeping, you're in a phase where you're not sleeping, making time for that rest is really important for rejuvenating the body. So again, food, water, sleeping, basics. We're not all really great at them, but it's amazing what a huge difference it can make when you have those 3 pieces in place.
Awesome. That's fabulous. I really appreciate that. And something else I caught as you were talking, it's this is going to change regularly because, and just, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my world, it takes at least 30 days or more to create a new habit. So for me, I look at things less about removing things, but more of adding or replacing things, looking at habits and going, okay, what am I currently doing? I love that I am so guilty, especially this past week. Today is a Friday we're recording, and this week I was off my game. But normally what I do, and I just got groceries this morning, so I'll be doing this evening, is I get whole foods, and then for the steaks, I cut them into the pieces that are ready to just get the seasoning and put on in the pan.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get the spinach or the whatever, and I chop it up. The mushrooms, I'll clean them, and a lot of things I'll pre-cook. And then because what I like to do personally is, and this is something I've learned, I think from you in part, I've been following you for so long, and the way we met, actually, first I was a reader or a user of one of your cookbooks. And I was like, this is so smart. And these things are so good. And it's just making these little teeny tiny changes. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started really implementing that to where I'd go, okay, what are the staples? eggs, right? That's always going to give me protein.
Mhm.
And I can use eggs in so many different ways. So if I have, for example, a few hard-boiled eggs at the beginning of the week, and I have raw eggs, and then I like pre-prep little bits, like these are things I have right now, right? Like a thing of broccoli and a thing of like chopped onions and mushrooms, things like that. And I put them into containers. So literally I have all these different containers, and I can say, what kind of omelet do I feel like this morning? And just get a couple of little things, throw them in the pan, and within 3 minutes, I have an omelet or a scramble, and it's healthy, it's whole foods, and it's delicious. And then I can use those same things where it's like, okay, well, I'm really hungry. I need something fast. I don't want to grab fast food or just eat junk. So, let me make a stew or a soup. Let me just grab a handful of shrimp out of the freezer. And then I've got, these things already chopped up, the celery, the onion, or whatever I want to throw in. I've got some broth already sitting, like already in the fridge. Boom. And within, 10 minutes, I have a healthy whole soup just for one. And I used to be when I was in a job, I would do like a Sunday meal prep, and I would full on prep my meals and put them in the freezer so that I could just grab it. And I would have these super long shifts and stuff. So I'd grab everything, put it in. But as somebody who's working from home and doing lots of meetings and things like that, I find that just having the ingredients to throw together for a single portion pre-prepped, and not necessarily the whole meal. So I can go, what do I feel like right now? And just grab bits and pieces. That's really helped me out a lot personally. And so, I think I just love what you were saying about the food journal. When I think food journal, sometimes that feels overwhelming, but just to be like, okay, how many times a day am I eating? And I've done this before where I've had like a chart, like a piece of paper, I put a laminate thing over, pop it on the fridge. And it's like, okay, I want to get 8 full glasses of water a day. How many, and every day go through and just kind of check off the things so that I'm actively doing a behavior that enforces what my goals are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, my go-to for it. I am a huge fan of lists. It's almost comical how dysfunctional I am when I don't have a list. Like that's how I know it's an ADD day, and I might get like 2 out of 5 things done as if I don't write it down. But every day I write down wake up, and then I write down eat breakfast, and then I write down 1 to 2 tasks, and then I write down eat lunch, and I write down have a snack. So I actually schedule it into my to-do list for the day. For some reason, it makes it feel a little bit more valid or a little bit more like a priority when it's on the list with all of the other work items that have to get checked off or errands that have to be run. And it keeps it in my awareness and my consciousness. So that I know also, okay, like I've factored into my schedule that this is going to happen. So it's not like it's taking me away from important things that need to happen. And in fact, I will feel better and be less resentful of my business at the end of the day if I feel good in my body and I've done what I can, even in the simplest way, like you said, to just kind of feed yourself. And I love that you like the prepped ingredients and then you can prepare custom meals. Like I usually go the opposite direction. I like sheet pan kind of food where you can just get like 4 chicken thighs and marinate them and then chop up some vegetables and throw everything on the same sheet pan and roast it. And then you have 4 meals ready to go. But I think if I had a little bit more creativity, I think I put all my creativity into my work and my cookbooks.
But I got this idea from you because I watch, and even like you share so much on Instagram too, but like the sheet pan thing, I'll see you do that. And I'm like, what a great idea. So I'll do it. But when I package it up, because I get bored eating the same things. Totally. So I'll have it. And then I'll have, let's say I'm going to have 1 piece of chicken with some vegetables when it's fresh out of the oven, but then I'm going to separate those vegetables and chop them separately. I'm going to take that chicken and maybe shred one of the pieces of chicken so that if I feel like having like a tortilla soup or, putting shredded chicken, or maybe I add some Frank's hot sauce because I want a buffalo style. So it's like, I take the ingredients that go into the whole thing. And then I make it that I don't have to think through and go, and I'm also single, right? So I'm only feeding myself. So I don't want to get bored. But if I have chicken, that's like that's the marinated chicken and baked with like, lemon and pepper and whatever. Great. That's really awesome once. But the next day I don't want to eat the same thing. So maybe I'm going to have some like buffalo style chicken with cauliflower that was already baked. But now I can just like toss it together and make like a, whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? Totally. So I think that I love that you said, creative, but it's, I think being able to talk about this so that people hopefully are going, oh, wow, I never thought of that. Oh, wow, I never thought of that. Like also with smoothies, I don't drink smoothies every day. In theory, I'd love to. I think it's great. However, sometimes I just don't feel like a freaking smoothie, but I have the spinach that I know, okay, there. And when I have some bananas, it's like, okay, there. And I always have those ice cubes ready. And I have the different add-ins that I can choose, because that's for me, I think maybe because I'm a creative, or maybe because I don't know what it is, but I get bored with something. If it's too habitual, if it's too routine, I get bored. So even like right now, in my water, I have some little slices of lemons. Well, I'm not going to be slicing up a lemon every time and putting a lemon sliced in a bag of the refrigerator. It's like it gets funky every once in a while. So if I have a fresh lemon that I'm using to marinate, or like I made hummus the other day. So I was like, oh, let me take the rest of this, chop it up, put a piece of lemon in each slot of an ice tray, pour in my water, boom. Now it's like, oh, that's a choice. Now it's done because this is the end of it. But now it's like, I could do that with strawberries. I could do that with whatever, just kind of like change things up. And it's just right there. I take those cubes, put them in a bag, and it's like, ooh, do I feel like lemon water, cucumber water, maybe a combination. Maybe I want some mint in there. Just grab some ice cubes, toss them into a thing, cover it with water. Right.
Love it.
Thanks. So yeah, I think, and again, I wouldn't have come up with a lot of this had I not been loving your cookbook and watching you and like follow, I mean, I started making my own ghee because it's so simple, because Kelsey did it. And it was like, oh my gosh, who knew? Right. So it's like, I think cumulatively for me at least, and for people like me, I think cumulatively as we get these new ideas or techniques, it's easy to fall off for somebody who's not driven by the routine. It's easy, I think, to fall off. Or like I'll put things in my calendar too. Lunch, right? Like I put sleep, wind down time, no computer, no phone, like turn it all off. But I somehow over time, like it doesn't affect me anymore. Maybe for a week or two, I might be like, yes, this is it. And I'm like sticking to that schedule. But then I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh, I'll move that around. Oh, I'll do it another time. And like I make exceptions. So I find for myself, the more ideas that are helpful, I can kind of add to my ever-growing toolbox, and then give myself the freedom to play within that toolbox with all these different things. I don't know, it works for me.
I love it. No, I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think that is so important, and such an important point, that what works for everyone might be a little bit different. And it really is about, again, understanding what's the base, what's the point? What's the point of this? We want to feel better in our bodies. We know that if we eat food and drink water, we feel better. Okay, great. But what does that look like when you apply it to your life? Maybe you cook one pan meals, maybe you cook 5 meals at a time and freeze them, and you're good for the month. There are a lot of different ways that it can fit into your life so that it matches your lifestyle and kind of keeps you interested and keeps you engaged. So I think that's really, really awesome that you figured that out and figured out the ideal way to work that into your life.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's so different depending on lifestyle. I mean, when I had foster kids, this is definitely not the way I was rolling. Right. And when I had a job that was 12-hour shifts and, an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back, like this is not, I was doing things differently. So I think that's such a good point. And hopefully this has inspired some thoughts and ideas with everybody who's watching right now to be like, oh, okay, I've got, this is what works for me, this kind of thing. And now I can try these sort of things to go within this. I think the awareness is so important. And the food journal, the sleep thing, like I love that you said, I don't hear people talking about this. And this is, it really hits home because I'm somebody who my brain is always going, I've got a million things. And meditation isn't always, sometimes I don't find it easy to quiet my mind in the evening. But what I have found is that I stress less about, I concern myself, that's a better word. I concern myself less about the hours, the number of hours that I sleep, and more about that. Am I at peace right now? How can I get myself more comfortable? If I try and make myself sleep, it's not going to happen. I'm going to do the opposite. And I've tried things like getting out of bed and doing this over the years, like doing something else, but then I get involved and that doesn't help. So for me, I'm just aware of how the different things work because I've tried all the things and I've taken notes. And I think also for me, giving myself a break, I'm very critical of myself. And I think we all are. I think most people who are high performers in anything they do are their own worst critics or own strongest critics. But what I have found over the years is that just by giving myself the grace and allowance to have days that are off and where I'm like, it's not like things are not firing right now, I'm okay with it. Taking the day, not worrying about it. I used to feel like I have to make up for it. And so I put more stress on myself in the future. And now I'm like, you know what? I know that everything's working for me, not to me. And it's all going to work out as long as I focus, like you said, on what is it that I want? What is the end result? And magically, the people, the circumstances, the things show up that help me get to that end goal without so much effort and without the stress. And maybe it is like, okay, I'd love to work out in the morning, but hey, I've gone now 3 days where I've really needed to get groceries so I can replenish my choices. And now I'm down to like a choice, like there's no choice left. I'm at the end. So this was like really a thought last night because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. The stores are closing in like an hour and a half and I got to drive there. And then usually at the end of the day, they don't really have fresh produce and meat and the things that I want. So it'll make more sense for me to go in the morning but where do I swap that out? Right. I swap that out with, I would like to be working out. I was going to go for a walk. I was going to go do a mindset thing. And I thought, well, I can do that a different time. I'm going to prioritize groceries in the morning so that these are the outcomes. This is more in alignment with my overall goal. And this other thing is not as high on the priority list, even though it's high, it can be moved to a different time or a different day. And that gives me more space to just do the thing that is the most important for me.
Yeah, totally. I think that that's actually would be the next step beyond like mastering the basics, is then kind of letting go of it. Because I love the tenet that you have to you have to learn the rules and master the rules before you can break the rules. And the example that came to mind was Salvador Dali, who is a surrealist painter and paints the most like wacky psychedelic for the 50s. I was like, where did this come from? He studied classical art. Like that was what he learned, the foundational tools in, and then figured out a way to apply it that really worked for his life and was different than the foundations that he had established initially, but still drew from them and just used them in more creative ways. And I think that, kind of like I said at the beginning, it turns out that entrepreneurs are also human. And so I think we can love the idea of systems and we can love the idea of structure. And then we have to figure out how to make it work in real life. So, I mean, I'm the same way. Like we have our priorities and self-care and well-being looks different every day, and kind of like asking yourself the question, what do you want right now? That is also related to what you need in a given moment. And like you're saying, and I think that's a perfect example of how you love the idea of being active in the morning, but a greater form of self-care for you at this point was to actually get food. And so these, again, basic priorities, figuring out how to take care of yourself in ways that are really simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it is just about having a good relationship with your needs, understanding the basic foundations of wellness, and then figuring out how you can make them work for your life. And it's always going to shift and change.
I love that. And I think it's also being aware of your habitual low functioning habits. So I know that for myself, when I haven't fueled my body properly and in a healthy way, I make poor choices. So even though I've made choices to where I don't have any junk in the house, if I've got to go out the door and drive somewhere to get food, I may make a poor choice because I don't feel like being around people. I don't want to go into a restaurant. I don't want to sit around and wait. I might just go through a drive-through because I think if I go to the grocery store, I'm just going to buy up all the things that I don't need and make poor choices at the grocery store. So then it's like, how do I, what's the lesser of the evil? Like, okay, I'm going to go to a drive-through, and the only drive-throughs that are open are these particular ones that don't have the healthiest choices. And frankly, I don't feel healthy right now. And I'm just freaking hungry. Like I'm hangry. And it's the worst time for me to make decisions. And so by also being aware of my default negative or negative behaviors, my default behaviors that I have when I'm at my highest and best, and when I'm on point, and when I'm doing the work that, is sustaining me in a good way. It's not even a thought. Like the idea of going through a drive-through makes me want to vomit. But when I'm feeling like totally depleted and things like that, it feels like the path of least resistance. And then it's like, it's not good. So I think I love that you said that's kind of the next step. You master the basics. And I feel like self-awareness is a huge part of those things before you start getting fancy.
Yeah, totally.
Well, this has been so much fun. I'd love to continue the conversation a little bit longer if we can keep going.
For sure.
Okay, cool. Before we do, I just want everybody, as usual, if you've been to any of the other sessions, I'm going to ask you, what are your greatest takeaways so far? I would love for you to grab your cell phone, take a picture, or in any way, get it out there and share with people about the summit, share with people about Kelsey and this talk specifically, share your greatest takeaway or anything you've learned. Use the hashtag MMFBL, Mindset Mastery for Business Leaders, and also tag at Kelsey Ale. I believe you're Kelsey Ale. The Kelsey Ale. Whoa.
It's a longer story how you got to that name.
I'm the Nicole Holland too in some places. So I get it. So we're going to hashtag MMFBL, and we're going to at the THE Kelsey, KELSEY ALE at the Kelsey Ale. So we can both get our eyes on your posts, and we'll be happy to reshare and just love feedback, because it's, when you're putting something out there in the world, whether it's a video or a podcast or a blog or anything, and it's coming from your heart and just who you are and your beingness, and you're sharing something, you never really know. You hope, right? You always you hope that it impacts people positively, but it's those confirmations that make us want to keep going and do more of it. So really appreciate everybody that's here, that's taking time to be with us. And we want to know more about, what is it that's keeping you here? So thank you for that. And Kelsey, so let's continue the conversation. If you've got any more basics for folks that you want to mention, like let's talk about the basics to master, and then that kind of next level that we've already sort of been talking about, but in more of a structured way, if possible, for people who aren't there yet. So, and then even if you want to take it to a next level, however you want to do it, I just love to give folks really something tangible to go, okay, where am I at? Boom, boom, boom. Okay, at this point now, I'm ready to do this next thing. How can I do that? Because I find that often we may know things and have the knowledge, but we can never get enough tactical, implementable
action points.
Yes. So take it away.
Yeah. I mean, I can't overemphasize how important it is to get on a regular eating schedule and make sure you're eating foods that are supportive to your goals. And I think, again, coming back to that question, what do you want for yourself? Probably you want more energy, increased focus, feeling more sustained energy throughout your day. Eating whole foods on a regular basis is going to help support that. Sleeping or resting, just designated rest time, super important. Drinking water, super important. From there, after you get those physiological basics down, I definitely would start to look at mindset and lifestyle, because stress is hugely impactful. It's just that total connection between mental and psychological and physiological. And I know that we as entrepreneurs, especially, and business and thought leaders, can kind of live in our heads and our brains, but there's a body attached to it, and that has to be it has to be maintained, and there's a direct connection. So I think stress management and lifestyle is the next place that I go when I work with my clients. And again, starting super simple. Where are areas of your life that could be simplified, or typically you have a team, I think, or an assistant who can help you strategize this. But if you don't, I am happy to look at it from a problem solving perspective and really start to see, I mean, I think initially the schedule, because I feel like time constraint is one of the biggest lacks we feel in our lives as business owners. We feel like we don't have enough time and enough hours in the day to get all the things done that need to get done. So how can we start reframing that, and how can we start prioritizing so that you're getting the highest leverage things done? But from there also, I know meditation doesn't work for everybody, but getting some sort of method or routine in place to cultivate inner stability, I think, is really important, because there's always so much happening in our lives and in our business that we have to really cultivate the inner stability to be able to manage the external chaos more effectively. Simple techniques that I like to use are breath work. I forget the guy's name, but it's a really simple practice of just inhaling for 5 counts through your nose, exhaling for 5 counts through your nose. So it's only nose breathing, which is, again, totally different, but he's done such, I'm going to have to get you the name so we can educate your watchers and listeners on this later. But yeah, he's done a lot of research on how mouth breathing actually isn't the best way for us to breathe, and how biologically nose shape has changed throughout time. But anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. But simple 5 count in and 5 count out breathing for about 15 minutes, which might not be a manageable time for a lot of people. I try to do a minimum of 5 breaths in and out for 5 counts, is a really great nervous system reset. And that's a tool you can use really at any point throughout the day. You don't need any sort of equipment to breathe, unless you do. But again, different topic. But ways to relax your nervous system and start to feel recentered are really important to find and then to implement on a regular basis. So when I'm working with clients, I talk through, again, what's manageable for your lifestyle, what's accessible for you, and what works. Because for me, I love meditation. For you, Nicole, meditation doesn't always work for you. So we would work together to find maybe a movement routine or something to do physically would be better for you to help feel centered throughout the day. So I think starting to master your stress level and find stress management tools, because it's not about not feeling stressed. That's not the reality of the 3D world that we live in. It's about your relationship to things that could be stressful, and how you choose to react to those things, and how you operate from that place that then can start to be renegotiated.
This is amazing. And there's also there's other sessions within the summit as well that also speak to these other points. Like, check out Gay Hendricks. We talked about some examples in there, and John Assaraf. And so this, thank you for sharing this, and so much good to take away. And I just want to also add that, this is not I'm not saying go get the upgrade, but if you haven't upgraded yet, something also just to let people know is, if you wind up upgrading so that you own all the content and you have that lifetime access, one of the gifts that I'm putting in there is a ticket for free to my live training. It's we're doing over the course of 5 days around 8.5 hours, I believe, called Refocus to Focus, where we're literally going to go through removing distractions, how to time block your calendar, how to identify what the most important things are for you, et cetera. So just in line with what Kelsey was saying, if that is something that you struggle with, is like getting control of your time and stress management and stuff like that, that's something that's just an added bonus for folks who upgrade that that you may want to enjoy. And if you don't want to upgrade, but you want that, just ping me and my team and we can get you in that as well. But yeah, the relaxing your nervous system. So good. So when we're thinking about holistically improving our health and wellness to optimize the way we lead, whether as a founder, an entrepreneur, or an employee, or, in any aspect of our life, as a parent in our household, for example, we're looking at our gut health and our lifestyle and like how our choices are affecting our bodies and our ability to be at the highest and best. And so then you're also looking at later on, like nervous system. What other systems, or are there any other, kind of as you move up the rung and or move down the rabbit hole, or whatever we want to call it, like as people get a hold of and really understand and are able to implement on their own these healing things, or these improvement things, these optimizations for the health, for the gut health, for the mindset and nervous system. Are there any other systems that we should be aware of, or areas to continue focusing on and optimize for as we master the basics?
I think that's a really great question. And unfortunately, I only have a general answer, which is that it's different for every person. And so I can speak to how I work one-on-one when I'm working with a client who comes in and maybe they're starting from zero. They're like, oh, I'm nauseous and haven't eaten during the day for 10 years because of this. Where do we start? We always start with getting nutrition on track. We get the digestive system functioning. We get gut health aligned. We reduce inflammation. We talk about stress. We start to implement lifestyle techniques. And again, this is after you've started doing the basics like eating and drinking water. Then we can move on, because that'll also free up a little bit more mental energy for you to start even becoming aware of things that might be stressing you out. And as you start to renegotiate those, that frees up a little bit more energy for you then to come back to reconnect with your body and say like, okay, if I have this foundation going, I'm managing my stress, what's going on now? Is something else off? Do I need more extensive testing for hormones or for adrenal function? But again, I think it's so personal to everyone because of our genetics, because of our lived lifestyle, because of our immediate environment, that everyone's needs are going to be slightly different. So once you get those foundations down, that's when you can actually start to get more connected with your own bioindividuality. Like, what does Nicole specifically need today and at this period in her life too? Because that is a thing that not only within our businesses changes, but over the lifespan, our bodies and physiology change and our needs in that capacity change. So that's my general, maybe helpful, maybe not helpful answer.
Well, I think it was helpful. So I hope everybody else found it helpful too. And with that, let's wrap things up. So if you have any final words of wisdom to leave us with, go for it. And we'll say goodbye for now, and people can definitely continue the conversation with you. We'll link up everything on the page. And
Yeah, I think my parting words would be just to keep it simple and keep coming back to checking in with yourself to see what you want and what you need. And from there, you can get clarity on how to get to the next step.
Thank you so much, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you.